All right, welcome to Peanuts from the Plebs. How's everyone doing this morning?
Hello,
Yeah,
everyone.
pretty good.
Good.
Yeah,
Early morning show.
All
yeah.
right, I know we're a little earlier today, so
Yeah, yeah.
uh, maybe we'll be even more awake than we are usually, or less awake, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Anybody have anything they want to talk about today?
I did want to start off the show with something,
All
if
right,
that's all
Daisy.
right. I think it's really important for us to talk about this stuff right now. So I wanted to start first by reading this quote by Martin Niemöller. Is that how you say that?
Uh,
Uh,
Niemöller.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So I said it right. Okay.
yeah.
I took German for a couple years. All right. So the quote goes: First they came for the socialists, and I
Right,
did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I think that that is so important right now, especially with what's going on with Trump, and his authoritarianism that is running rampant now. Um, and I just thought that I wanted to give a shout out to the Convo Couch. I think the work that they have been doing lately is super important. They've actually been on the ground doing on the ground reporting in Portland, showing how these federal agents, along with the Portland PD, um, working in tandem using tear gas on citizens, using flashbang grenades, using tactics that are used overseas, right? These are military tactics that are being used on US citizens. And I think that it's important to talk about these things now because, like that quote said, we can't just wait until something affects us and then that's when we speak out because it might be too late by that point, right?
Right.
And one of the things that Johnny from the Convo Couch that he was pointing out that I thought was really poignant was that at one point they were showing how the disproportionate response of these federal agents against these protesters that were essentially they were like throwing water bottles at a door, right? And it reminded me of how that's how it always is in Palestine with Israel. It's always a
Overkill. Yeah.
disproportionate response where you have the Palestinians who have been protesting, who have been fighting to be able to return, right? The March of Return, and they throw rocks at the IDF and they get met with rubber bullets and they have killed and maimed how many Palestinians?
Mm,
And they always use the response of, well, but they throw stuff at us or whatever. That's a disproportionate response to
hmm
kill someone because they throw something at you. And I think that for so long people have been quiet about imperialism overseas, and that's the one thing that I've noticed in all of the coverage that I'm starting to see about this, especially in independent media, is that they're saying how imperialism has come home to roost.
Right.
And again, this is why it's super important that we all speak out about these things. We cannot be quiet, especially because it started in Portland, and now he's talking about how he's going to send troops to Chicago and all over. And what's it going to take for people to actually come out and say no?
Right.
Right.
Okay, so what form is that going to take? I mean, because speaking out can be obviously just literally speaking out, right? Or writing things on Facebook or Twitter, right? Or it could actually mean going to that location or preempting them, even like going to a federal building in Boston, for example, and saying, we're going to surround this federal building just as a symbolic protest, a nonviolent protest, and see what kind of reaction to get. Because obviously, if we keep waiting for them to take the first step, whether it's Portland or Chicago, and now they're talking about Seattle, New Mexico, other
Mm,
places, then we're kind of always reacting to like whatever they do. And I think it's important to preempt it because, for instance, um, in Germany, where you had Hitler taking over in 1933, um, if people had stepped up right away. And, you know, or for instance, with the, you know, the Kristallnacht, 1938, where all the German, the synagogue, I mean, the Jewish, the synagogues and stores were looted. If people had stood up to that, I mean, at that point, it was probably almost too late, but people, you know, people stand up. These are basically bully tactics, you know, on the part of the government. So what bullies are afraid of is someone actually standing up to them. So there are a lot of bullies are a lot of, you know, bravado and you know, intimidation, but there's usually not a lot behind it. But they're in the phase now of you know, they're gathering their troops together, literally. So I mean, this is the point where we have to make a stand and say that we're standing up to that. But if we just go, let's say we go to Seattle, you know, if we were going to go to Seattle, we're going to go to Portland, and we start throwing bottles or whatever, is that really the most effective way to do it? Or should we use maybe a, you know, the Gandhi approach in India against the British, a nonviolent approach where if the federal troops show up, then the protesters just sit down and say, we're not going to move, and don't put up any resistance, but just sit down and then let that be filmed, you know, so it can be, you know, there'd be a record of it,
So
but not actually fight back, because if you fight back, there's no way you can fight back with water bottles against these weapons, you know, and
Right. You
like you
can't
say,
fight
Daisy,
violence with violence.
they're going to escalate it, right? And so, and it's more, and of course, that gives them an excuse too, because, you know, Trump is just waiting for someone to shoot one of these federal troops and kill them, right? And say, like, look, you know, this is Antifa, they're being armed. We have to crack down even harder, and they have unlimited weapons. I mean, there's just no way you can fight fire with their fire, because they're unlimited. So I think we need to have a nonviolent approach. And what I haven't really seen much of, and maybe I've just missed it, but I haven't seen much in the alternative media about the need for a nonviolent Gandhi-like approach that's widespread. And also people will participate in that, because you're not saying, okay, you have to go there and you have to throw something or you have to whatever. You're just going to go there and just have a presence and be seen. It seems like that's what we need at this point.
So yeah, so I would say first of all, you know, bright lights are the best disinfectant, right? So we do have to give a shout out to Convo Couch and other mostly alternative media that are showing the truth on the streets there. That's fantastic. Definitely peaceful reply is the way to go. I mean, I think the moms in Portland, I think, is a pretty reasonable approach. I think the movement needs something like the symbolism of the umbrellas in Hong Kong. They need something where, hey, go get your easily obtainable thing that shows up when you have a mass of it. It looks fantastic. You know, so I think something like that would really help. Umbrellas might even help physically repelling, but whatever, we need something like that. And the other thing is, people can't go to sleep when Democrats are in office, because the reason they can do this stuff is because the snatching people off the streets and holding them out charges is because Obama signed the NDAA, which allowed indefinite detention without trial or charge. And when he did that in 2012, I'm like, we just had, you know, Bush and Cheney that we know are authoritarian enough to use this stuff. And I was thinking, all right, within a few presidents, somebody's going to use this like this. And it turns out it was one presidential term later, we've got this being used. So right. People can't drop the anti-war movement, and they can't take their eyes off the government because they feel safe because Dems are in place, because you're not safe.
So if you look at the coverage, at least like the coverage that I've been seeing of what's going on in Portland, the moms actually coming out in full force like that was a response to the federal agents showing up on the streets of Portland, right?
And then it had it was a good, peaceful message that was going to get media attention. It was an excellent idea.
Right. And then after that, because they, as a response to how the federal agents were tear gassing and using these same tactics on the moms, then you had the dads come out with the leaf blowers, right?
Right.
And that was used blow away at least the chemical agents in the air. And again, one of the things that it really shook me, and that's why I wanted to give a shout out to the Convo Couch, because I've been to protests and I've seen how scary it can get, but getting pepper sprayed, and like you can hear Johnny, because a good portion of it is Johnny's footage, and he is just retching. It's like so hard on them,
Yeah.
And that is to have people on the front lines, being willing to put themselves through all those things, because we need to all stand up and fight against these things. That is what's really important. And they are actually using a lot of the tactics that they're using in Hong Kong. They are using the umbrellas, and it is kind of helping them. They're forming like a wall, essentially, like a frontline wall to protect a lot of the other people.
But, go ahead.
So, I mean, we're, like I talked about last week, they are using these, I guess, like CIA intelligence agency tactics here. We just need people to all get into this fight. It can't just be a few here and there.
But part of the resistance training has to be, how do you respond to this? Because obviously you're taking a risk. You go, when you're one of those moms and you go down there, you're taking a risk because they got tear gassed, right? Or they don't know, they may get detained. They have a job, they have to show up the next morning. So there may be consequences of this. The thing is, so the consequences at this stage are much less than what the consequences could be down the road.
Right.
So I mean, I think of in Argentina, where you had a repressive government and you actually had the mothers of the disappeared in Argentina. It's the same kind of thing, because then it puts it on a human level. So you see, these are actually children, not children, but I mean, they're sons and daughters of, and their parents are showing up. So it's like you're attacking the family, right? So then it becomes a different thing, like not just attacking these leftists who are sponsored by Antifa or whatever, and you kind of abstract it, or they're whatever, but you're actually seeing, okay, these are families that you and I can identify with, and we're seeing them being attacked. So that puts it in that perspective. But what we need some kind of training, because like let's say we had an action and we're going down to some place and we're gonna symbolically surround a federal building. We're not going to really do anything. We're not going to have any kind of we're going to not have any kind of violence. We're not even going to have anything we can throw or attack, whatever. We can use our words, but when they come in and they tell us to disperse and we don't, how do we respond to that? Do we have a nonviolent way of responding? And understanding that, yes, you may be detained, you may be tear gassed. This is how you respond. And part of the whole Gandhi technique was, it was very explicit how you respond. When the British came in and said, you have to move, they told people how to respond to it. And I think this technique was used in the 60s as well.
Right.
And I think this is a time where we really need to have that kind of organization, so it does not escalate into it's just going to get worse. We want to make it a bigger movement, not a more violent confrontation.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, sorry. Can I just get in here real quick?
Sure.
So two things. So one, I was going to say that in the 60s, that is something that they used in the civil rights movement, that they would teach. They would teach these activists how to take a beating and how to take all of these things and just like sit there and not react. And that was part of it, that, educating people on how to, and I believe at least Jill Stein, when she was running, after 2016, she actually started doing these classes where they were showing people how to, non-violently do these actions or whatever. But I don't think it got very far. So I definitely agree with that. And then Jim, also to add on to what you were saying, Jimmy Dore actually talked about how, and he gave a really powerful message about how, that while Trump is the one who's doing these things, he's only able to do it because he is funded by Nancy Pelosi and our Congress.
Yes,
who,
the DHS
just passed the NDAA, right?
Right.
And they're the ones who are funding all of these things that they supposedly fight him on.
Yeah, and the important point he made to that was they fund the DHS, which is being used for this, and in the funding, they apply no strings as to how they can be used. It literally is, here's your brown shirt troops, use them as you want, as you see fit. Literally, that's essentially what ends up happening the way they're provided. I do see, like on Amnesty International and other sites, there are some pretty extensive protest preparation things, including how to lock down your phone and all that stuff that's important, in modern times, what to do to prepare for for being tear gas and all that kind of stuff. But I think, to your point, Steve, obviously this should be distributed from, as the people know, as a definitely trusted source. Amnesty International, I'm not sure if everyone's going to look this up. Whoever organizes protests ought to be providing this, and I bet they are to some extent. I've seen various things where,
I mean, they'll take your phone. They'll just take your phone. So like, if you're not willing to give up your phone, don't bring your phone.
That's exactly right.
So like, I mean, just saying, like, there's some common sense stuff, but you have to have some kind of I wouldn't say coordinated, but it has to be, you have to be on the same page in terms of how you're going to respond to this, because people, they're bringing out in the news, like so-and-so, attack somebody with a hacksaw or something, like they're one of the protesters, like they're trying to like say, look, these protesters are violent, this justifies the crackdown. And I think we need, if it's a good parallel is a civil rights movement in the 60s. Martin Luther King, who was very much influenced by Gandhi. I mean, he was a student of Gandhi, read Gandhi's autobiography, talked about Gandhi and his nonviolence approach. I think that's what we need to capture that now. And maybe that's on us, to help.
But also being realistic that there are people that, I mean, you saw in the Chaz thing, there were people that, violence broke out in what's supposed to be a safe area. People need to.
But we also don't know if there was any sort of authorities.
Let me finish my thought. Groups need to police themselves and make sure if somebody gets out of line that they know, and this comes along with the communication, that you have to get all that information out about this is how we behave in a peaceful protest to make our point. Otherwise, it's going to be used as propaganda against you, and it is being. The relatively few situations of protesters acting incorrectly is being used as propaganda against the entire movement, and that's very hurtful.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you do have a kind of a program of nonviolence, and these are the rules we follow and everything, I think that can actually work in your favor, because you're saying that. You're saying that that's what we stand for. We're not. The problem is violence and using military force and trying to oppress people. That's the problem. And so trying to use that same weapon back is not going to be effective. But
exactly.
If we use nonviolence,
communication is so key. Yeah.
Right.
On how to do this.
And
properly.
I think the people are with us. I mean, there's a certain number of people. I mean, I read Facebook comments and everything, and some people are like, yeah, we need to crack down. We need to stop the we can't have property damage in our cities. We need to side with the police or whatever. And Blue Lives Matter and that stuff. You see that, but I really think the tide is changing in this country, and I think the majority of the people do support a reasonable approach. Yeah, of course you want to have order in your cities, right? You want to be able to run your business or live your life, right? But people don't want a fascist, brown shirt troops in their city threatening violence. I mean, I think people are on our side, but we have to act. I think we have to act sooner and not wait. Like in keeping with that Niemöller quote, they're obviously going to see how far they can push it, And
it's kind of complicated at this point, right? Because, we're right on the brink of an election. So it's almost like, do you just put your effort into that, largely?
What election? I mean, is there going to be an election? Because Trump could all of a sudden say, well, the coronavirus is resurgent, and for public safety, we're going to suspend the elections. We're going to suspend them until February, right? And then February comes and goes. So and
he would have to have the cooperation of a lot of folks to make that happen, but I'm not saying that it couldn't. I mean, it's yeah, we're in a pretty bizarre time where it's really hard to figure out what would happen. I mean, you wouldn't have thought that what's going on now could happen, right? I mean, with the troops, essentially federal troops going into these cities like this.
Right. Or if Trump is somehow defeated and Biden becomes president, and then people trying to sit back and say, well, now we solved the problem, we got rid of Trump. It's not that simple. I think
Well, I agree with that. They can't go back to sleep because the Democrats and what we're saying between the DHS and the NDAA, if Trump's firing at people in the streets, the Dems are right behind him with the ammunition. Basically, they've provided the framework for authoritarianism.
right.
That everyone should have seen this coming as they were creating these laws and these that allowed this behavior.
But it's been a steady progression ever since, for the last 40 years of this kind of wealth inequality and, less and less rights. I mean, wages have gone down. Everything, like the standard of living has gone down for people over the last 40 years. So it's like not something that's just happened in the last couple of years. Yeah, it's become more accentuated, but it's an ongoing process. And, and like you said, Daisy, that the American hegemony has come home now to roost, so that now it's turning inward. And Trump's, Bush's war was Iraq. Trump's war is the U.S. So Trump is using troops against the so-called whatever the troublemakers in the U.S. right, which is like 80% of the population, because he'd like to have everyone Mar-a-Lago and golf courses and all that stuff, but like forget about everything else. I think that's the real perspective we have to. This is not an anti-Trump action, right? That's a key thing. And the mainstream Democrats are trying to portray this as anti, whatever the fight against Trump, but really this is a fight against authoritarianism, for democracy and for justice, right?
Right.
For social justice.
Yes.
So I think
absolutely.
you need a bigger perspective.
True.
So, okay, so two things. So, like, the first one is that, we're always so quick to just call out what's going on at the moment, right? Like with the whole thing with when Trump had the travel ban, it was a big deal because he was banning people at the airports. But then what was it that caused this? It was Obama's bombing of all of these places, right? That caused this refugee migration, right? And with what's going on with these federal agents, yes, it is, an overreach, I feel, from the federal government, but these are things that they're not new. These are tactics that have been used by our police, and with what the main reason why we were having these protests to begin with is about this police violence. And one of the things that has been highlighted with Portland is that they have been fighting against this sort of like militarization and just like abuse by the authorities in Portland for a really long time. This isn't something new. And so that's why Portland is actually poised to be like a really good place to start these actions, because they've been doing this for so long. That again, this isn't something new. So while yes, it is important to highlight the fact that Trump is, being an authoritarian and all this kind of stuff, it's also important to highlight that these are issues that have been going on, and we can't just care now because Trump is doing it. We have to care also when our elected officials, the people that we put in office, when they fuck up, we have to hold them to account for this too.
Right. And that's kind of underscored by, I think, the mayor of Portland, right, went out amongst the people, and he was essentially getting booed and shouted down because the people knew that, well, you were doing the same stuff just a few weeks ago, Right, exactly.
Right. And then the second thing that I wanted to talk about was that I think that what this really highlights is that we keep going on these wars, right? It's a war against drugs and a war against crime and a war against terror. And what we have come to find out is that these wars don't work. right? And
Right.
all it is that in the background, you have these people, these filthy, rich, disgusting people who are just getting richer, okay, off of the backs of the American people and off of the lives of people all over the world. That's ultimately what all of this comes down to.
Right. Yep.